The House of the Hidden Places, by W. Marsham Adams. Preface. The remarkable correspondence that may be traced between the passage chambers of the Great Pyramid, designated by the ancient Egyptians as the cut or lights, and the various stages traversed, according to the creed of that venerable nation, by the sanctified deceased in transitioning from the light of earth to the illumination of eternal day, was first delineated by the present writer last year within the pages of the New Review. Prior to its publication, the substance of the article was submitted to M. Maspero and Professor Sayce, and I desire to convey my profound gratitude to those distinguished authorities for the recognition and encouragement they graciously afforded me, as well as to Mr. Menjdot, the hieroglyphic scholar, for his meticulous revision of my work. In the present volume, this identical analogy is elaborated in far greater detail. Not comprehensively, indeed, for such an undertaking might well demand the labor of years, yet sufficiently, I trust, to establish a lucid foundation for subsequent investigation in either direction. In the case of the ritual, we obtain what appears to be a coherent and intelligible analysis of that hitherto inscrutable creed, achieved through the progressive transformation of the human faculties during successive stages of illumination. Concerning the pyramid, we are led to postulate a spiritual and singularly prescient purpose underlying its construction. For within that wondrous edifice, the very stones of which, in their silent harmony, seem to refute the baseless charges of folly and pride heaped by ignorance upon its architect, we possess nothing less than an indestructible and immutable emblem of the national religion. The validity of the general thesis herein proposed depends, demonstrably, upon the precision of the correspondence established, or sought to be established, between the pathway so jealously guarded within the interior of the Pyramid of Light and the path textually described in that renowned compendium of sacred Egyptian writings which we designate the Book of the Dead, but which claims as its proper title the Book of the Master of the Hidden Places. Yet these points of correspondence are so numerous in themselves, and constitute so rigorous a system of mutual verification, as to reduce almost to nullity the probability of their arising from mere coincidence, whilst no degree of ingenuity, perhaps the most insidious of all adversaries to truth, could suffice to satisfy the innumerable conditions connected with the worship, the calendar, and the civil constitution of the country which such a correspondence must inevitably fulfill. Nor should it be supposed that an inquiry of this nature possesses merely archaeological interest, or that the delineation of so ancient a creed can serve no higher purpose than the gratification of idle curiosity. Far from it. If there exists a truth in the historical development of nations that empirical research has clearly demonstrated, it is the extraordinary tenacity of ancient belief and its enduring influence upon the structure of society, inasmuch as religion, far more than social convention, appears to have constituted the foundation of ancient law. Each passing generation modifies, undoubtedly, yet only in the slightest degree, the character of the social contract, and this alteration is wrought not for itself, but for the generation that succeeds. Should we desire, therefore, to trace more clearly the relation of man in his complex individuality to the still more intricate organism of human society, wherein each individual performs a distinct function, we can do no better than thoroughly examine the creed of the earliest recorded civilization. Moreover, the illuminating insights which such an investigation casts upon the political and social constitution of that extraordinary nation, clarifying, in instance after instance, peculiarities that have hitherto seemed anomalous, afford, in my estimation, powerful confirmation of the principle I have advanced. More striking still, the religious systems of other nations of the ancient world become suddenly luminous when contemplated in the light of Egypt. and as chord after chord is struck, the full diapason of the creeds responds. A singular circumstance, which may illustrate this observation, arises from the necessity of expressing the esoteric analogies between the references to the light, which abound in the ritual, and the hidden places of the Great Pyramid, the supreme light of the Egyptian world. For in treating of the concepts thus petrified, so to speak, within that mysterious structure, I have been led, or rather compelled, to employ phrases and symbols current within the Masonic fraternity of the present age, such as the Grand Arch, the Purple Arch, the Royal Arch, the Star, the Open Angle, the princes of which, as well as the princes of the Circle, are mentioned in the Papyrus of Sinahit, of exceedingly remote antiquity, and other insignia of the craft. Whenever, therefore, such expressions occur, and they of necessity permeate the entire work, it should be remembered that they are here intended to refer to the actual masonry of the Great Pyramid, and to the analogous features in the ritual of ancient Egypt. At the same time, whether any vestige of this secret doctrine of light survives in that esoteric lore of which those bound by Masonic vows are forbidden to speak, is an intriguing question that naturally presents itself, though it clearly cannot be resolved through public discourse. The consideration, however, which to my own mind most powerfully confirms the evidence of a connection between the pyramid and the ritual is, I confess, of a somewhat personal character. For in order to detect such an analogy, if indeed it exists, the principal qualification required is a steadfast patience in collating and analyzing the results achieved by others within their respective domains of scholarship. Yet to summon it into existence were it not already latent, to construct in the imagination the path of the righteous, and to express it in terms of the movements of light, to portray the mystery of unseen depths through the mystery of the visible heavens, to foreshadow the attributes of light within passages of profoundest gloom, and its dynamics in a structure that has remained immutable for ages, that would represent an intellectual masterpiece demanding nothing less than a creative genius of the very loftiest order. So majestic is the outline of this conception as it rises solemnly upon the view, so sublime is every feature of the prospect, at once defining and transcending the ultimate boundaries of space and time. With such measured cadence, yet such overwhelming splendor, does it illuminate successive mysteries of the invisible world, that I cannot for a moment believe it to be the mere product of my own imagination. It appears far more probable that, although much of the moral and spiritual imagery remains obscure, we nevertheless possess here a genuine clue to the most profound and captivating enigma of antiquity, and that the more closely we study the path of light in its structural form, the more deeply we shall penetrate the earliest wisdom of which humanity has left record, thereby comprehending the Egyptian doctrine concerning the dark passage of death and the entry into eternal day. Chapter 1. The Pyramid of Light. Proximate to the margin of the immense desert that stretches its arid wastes across the entire breadth of the continent to the shores of the Western Ocean, precisely at the apex of the celebrated delta which marks the confluence of Upper and Lower Egypt, at the very juncture where the vibrant activity of the earliest recorded civilization bordered upon the vast and desolate solitude, stands the most majestic and mysterious monument ever erected by human hands. Of all the other structures that constituted the wonders of the ancient world, scarcely a vestige remains. Where now are the Hanging Gardens, the pride of the Babylonian monarch? Where is the far-famed Pharos of Alexandria? Centuries have elapsed since seismical convulsions laid low the colossus that best rode the harbor of Rhodes, and a fanatic's hand reduced to ashes the temple of Artemis, the pride of Ephesus. Yet the great pyramid of Giza remains undestroyed and indestructible. Ages after those lesser wonders have passed away, even as it stood epochs before they were first conceived. Verily, more than 50, perhaps even 60 centuries have elapsed since that edifice, which has never since required the care of man, first concealed from view its hidden sanctuaries, those secret chambers of which no other building on the globe contains the like. Upward of 2,000,000 times has the sun risen and set upon its colossal ramparts since first the pure, unbroken surface of its burnished casing stones reflected the solar rays like a veil of dazzling luster, thereby vindicating its ancient appellation, the light. What the concealed significance of that esoteric masonry may be, by whom and for what purpose its complex design was conceived, and at what epoch the vast structure was erected, are questions that have long perplexed many minds in many lands, culminating in a discord more akin to Babel than to the tranquility of its silent majesty. It was constructed by the Hebrews in the days of their captivity, asserts, or rather formerly asserted, one school of theorists. It was built by chemists, though attributed by the Egyptians, out of animosity toward him, to the shepherd Felician, according to the account of Herodotus. It was built by Ibn Salluq, the Arabs claim, immediately prior to the deluge, to preserve the royal treasures from the predicted inundation. It was built by Melchizedek, or some such figure, vehemently asserts the Scottish professor of astronomy, who seems invariably to write in a tempest of indiscriminate indignation. It was indisputably intended by the founder as his tomb, one faction stoutly maintains, a tomb in which he left explicit instructions that he should not be interred, and wherein no person could possibly have been buried, another counters. It was an observatory, maintains a third, wherein every place for observation was meticulously sealed, retorts a fourth. It is the prophetic chronological scroll of human history, exclaims Professor Smith. With all the dates erroneous, softly sneers Mr. Flinders Petrie. Parallel to that Masonic mystery, well nigh as impenetrable at the present moment as when the Hirsheshta, or Master of the Secret, was an officer of Pharaoh's household, there has descended to us another enigma. The strange collection of sacred writings, or ritual of ancient Egypt, which modern writers have designated the Book of the Dead, but which claims for itself the title of the Book of the Master of the Hidden Places. Vivid though the interest currently awakened in those writings may be, little progress has been made in clarifying their meaning. The doctrines inculcated by their religion, the relationship of the worshipper to the object or objects of adoration, and the significance of the particular symbol under which those relations were at once veiled and expressed, are but little better understood at the present time, notwithstanding our greatly increased knowledge of the sacred writings, than when the hieroglyphs themselves remained undeciphered. Yet, remarkable as it is, prominently as these mysteries stand out in every matter relating to ancient Egypt, no one has hitherto thought of collating the Masonic secret of the monument with the doctrinal secret contained in the mysterious books of Thoth, to whom the origin of Egyptian wisdom is attributed. Such an omission is all the more singular, because indications are not lacking on either side to suggest a connection. That Khufu, erroneously called Cheops by the Greeks, should have adopted the pyramidal form in the hieroglyph of his name is not surprising, as he was the monarch under whom the building was erected. But it is perhaps not unworthy of notice that the form of the pyramid enters into the hieroglyphic representation of the star Sothis, or Sirius. For the grand orient or position of that star when its rising forms the immediate harbinger of dawn on midsummer morning, was, as is well known, the great starting point for the epochal cycles of the Egyptian reckoning. And whereas the figure usually employed to denote the pyramid embraces both the edifice and the rocky platform upon which it is constructed, The form used in the hieroglyph of Sothis consists of the Masonic portion alone, that is to say, the structure which represented to the Egyptian mind the eternal light, apart from its earthly support, while a papyrus dating from the time of Khufu, the founder of the building, speaks of Isis as the ruler of the pyramid, and a later inscription, that of Syene, calls her also the Mother of God, and identifies her with the divine Sothis, the star, the Queen of Heaven. On the other hand, the sacred writings or ritual of ancient Egypt are replete with allusions that become coherent only when applied to the Pyramid of Light. Such are the festivals of the Northern Passage and of the Southern Passage, that of the hidden lintel and that of Osiris, who dwells in the roofed house and in the pool of the great house. Thus, in the calendar of Esneh we read of the festival of the sockets, and again of the opening of the doors, which is intimately connected in the ritual with the chapter of the orientation and the raising of Osiris from the open tomb. The entire progress of the deceased appears, in fact, to take place within some manner of building. The ritual is filled with references to his entry and departure, to his entering in after coming out, and to his passing gates, gateways, doors, and staircases. Nay, the very titles employed, whether in the written or the Masonic record, point directly, albeit covertly, to one another. Where else, if not in these chambers so jealously concealed, the like of which not even the later pyramids contain, shall we look for the hidden places, the master of which is claimed as its own master by the Book of the Dead. Furthermore, hundreds of years prior to the date of the principal papyrus containing those writings, as early as the 12th dynasty, the inscription on the coffin of Amamu, interred in the sacred city of Abydos, makes a similar allusion and demonstrates that the secret places determine the order of the ritual. Thou hast not departed dying. Thou hast departed living unto Osiris. Now hast thou found the words of order, the mystery of the secret places. What a sudden significance, then, attaches to the title Takut, the light whereby the Great Pyramid, that monument of flame, was known to the pharaohs, when, turning to the sacred papyri, we find the title of the opening chapter to be the Pir Emhru, or entrance on light, that is, not the light of common day which the deceased was quitting, but, as is demonstrated by the image of the setting sun wherewith the descent into the tomb was always associated, of the invisible light of the unseen world, renewed forever in the splendor of Osiris. For the doctrine contained in those mystic writings was nothing other than an account of the path pursued by the righteous when, the bonds of the flesh being dissolved, he passed through stage after stage of spiritual growth, until, initiated in the new birth and illumined in the hidden life, he became indissolubly united with him whose name, says the Egyptian ritual, is Light, Great Creator. And that path which the ritual delineates in writing, the Great Pyramid of Light, materializes in masonry. In the dual symbolism of pyramid and ritual lie both the chief difficulties of decipherment and the strongest evidence of their correspondence. For as the deceased in his progress was to become united in the fullness of intimacy with his Creator, so it was necessary that he should progress in the knowledge of the mysteries that envelop alike the spiritual and the material creation. To know Osiris in his forms of manifestation was the secret of power. To comprehend Osiris in all his names, Osiris in all his places, conferred the crown of illumination. Yet, in the acquisition of that infinite knowledge, numerous stages remain to be traversed by the finite mortal, and manifold degrees to be attained by the sanctified departed. Once the portal of the tomb, the gateway to eternal day, had been unsealed on his behalf, and the catechumen of divine wisdom had been received as the postulant of immortality. The spiritual double or essence of the deceased, the Ka or the postulant represented with uplifted arms, behooved to be recreated in incorruption, and the soul born anew, ere that postulant might be initiated into sacred mysteries. Furthermore, the initiate was required to endure the fiery ordeal and be approved as an adept. The adept, in turn, must be justified before the tribunal of truth prior to emerging from the obscurity of the halls of death into the immediate presence of the source of light. The justified was bound to become the illuminate, and the illuminate to be perfected as a master, before attaining the innermost sanctuary within the divine house of Osiris. For each of these successive degrees, according to Egyptian theology, the Creator ordained a distinct locus within the grand external manifestation of Himself, the cosmic expanse, and each of these localities is symbolically delineated in the volumes of the mystical ritual, as well as monumentally inscribed within the architecture and proportions of the hidden places of the pyramid. Consequently, that house was not accessible to all, nor could any transgression be more inexpiable than the desecration of its mysteries. This book declares the concluding chapter of the ritual is the greatest of mysteries. Let no eye behold it, for such would be an abomination. Likewise, the secrecy commanded by the ritual was physically enforced by the configuration of the structure, nor was it ever violated so long as Egypt preserved her native sovereignty. Moreover, since it was the defining attribute of that religion to remain shrouded, and as the manifestation of the Creator is inherently more profound and arcane than the comprehension of His works, it was imperative that the symbols pertaining to Him, and to the communion of humanity with Him, should not disclose their profoundest secrets even to the initiate, but should reserve their more esoteric import for the illuminate after rigorous probation. Herein lay the challenge presented to the primordial Hirshesta, the master of the secret and originator of Egyptian wisdom, to articulate, yet in articulating to conceal, to veil, yet with a shroud of light, the mysteries of the Godhead, and to select such symbols as would, without betraying their essence, transmit their vital efficacy, their illuminating power, and, above all, their imperishable endurance. Manifestly, no mundane representation, be it mineral, animal, vegetable, or human, could suffice for an expression of this nature. Only the celestial bodies, conforming in their radiant courses to immutable laws, could satisfy the requisite conditions. Equally in the pictorial and the architectural records, the path of the righteous is delineated amidst the luminous spheres, and his advancement measured by the metrics of celestial motion. A striking illustration of this is the orbit of the Earth, implying an understanding of both the axial rotation of the globe and its revolution about the sun, upon which the ancient Egyptian calendar was predicated. The Lord of the Orbit, Neb-Senen, was a title borne by the Egyptian monarch. And within the pyramid, we discover this orbit, alongside various other astronomical phenomena, monumentally inscribed upon the walls of the magnificent and unparalleled upper chamber of ascent. Similarly, another major astronomical concept, namely the horizon, pervades not only the Book of the Dead, but the entirety of the funerary iconography of the land, as exemplified in the Sciensinsen, or Book of the Migration of the Soul, as well as in the papyrus of Queen Anshnizureneferab and other manuscripts. Which horizon, then, is this horizon of heaven to which such profound mystery is attached, and what constitutes its apex, the grand zenith of the celestial vault? Modern thought possesses no such comprehensive concept, and consequently, our understanding of the celestial mechanism lacks a certain elegant simplicity. Let us assume, however, that on the day of the equinox, the equal division of light and darkness, we stand upon the equator, which bisects the globe into the northern and southern hemispheres, and that we establish our position, let us say, at the point of its intersection with the meridian of Memphis, adjacent to the lake whence flow the waters of the life-giving river. At our feet extends the vast plain passing through the celestial poles and bounded by the purple arch that encompasses the floor of the stellar canopy. From the center of our horizon on that day, the sun ascends vertically. And at the zenith of his course, where daily he bisects the sky into east and west, on that day alone does he likewise bisect the grand arch or grand meridian, which rises transversely from the same horizon and extends from pole to pole across the azure depths. We shall then have delineated the 4 cardinal points of the universal sphere, the 4 coordinates by which the sides of the pyramid of light were defined, which, according to Egyptian cosmology, constituted the fiery thrones of the 4 sons of light, the most illustrious of whom was Hapi, the presiding deity of the Nile. Into that grand horizon, moreover, when the balanced day is spent, the sun descends beneath the western waters. And from it, the entire celestial host, extending from pole to pole in disciplined array, each maintaining its ordained distance from the solar path, follows him through the silent night, the night wherein the spirits are numbered, one half ascending into visibility as their leader vanishes, while the remainder complete their ranks just in time to herald his return from the eastern point of that same grand horizon. The road is of fire, declares the ritual. They gyrate in flame behind him. This horizon appears to be remarkably indicated by the entrance passage of the Great Pyramid, which, as is widely recognized, may be defined by reference to the position of the pole star. Indeed, if we accept the chronology of the 4th dynasty proposed by Dr. Brugsch circa 3700 BC, we find that approximately 260 years thereafter, in 3440 BC, the pole star of that epoch, Alpha Draconis, occupied, as Professor Smith has demonstrated, precisely that position, allowing its light to shine directly down the passage. Thus, the disciples of the Master of the Secret, who through successive generations must have observed the gradual approach of the star for upwards of 2 centuries, would receive in its ultimate alignment the most persuasive verification of those astronomical correspondences in which their mystical religion was enshrined. Hence, when we read in the ritual of the good paddle of the north, the opener of the disk, we are immediately reminded of the narrow, paddle-shaped passage, expanded at its northern entrance, which connects the sacred interior with the outer universe. A celestial dial pointer sweeping through space and perennially indicating the position occupied by each successive star that, for a transient epoch of centuries, keeps vigil at the pole. Holding now the sacred scriptures of the Pir Emhru, let us approach the architectural light, and opening the volume at the 1st chapter, wherein Thoth, the eternal wisdom, begins to instruct the catechumen liberated from corporeal corruption, let us accompany him into the interior of the edifice, obtaining such a preliminary view of its sacred chambers and their ritual analogues as will facilitate a deeper study of the dual expression of that architectural mystery. Reciting chapter by chapter as we ascend, grade by grade in unison with the catechumen of light, we approach at the 15th step a portal situated 2 masonry courses above us, precisely as the catechumen in the 15th chapter approaches the double gate of the horizon, the double-arched gateway aligned with the pole star, when he invokes Hariris, the great guide of the universe, the leader of souls within their hidden places, the light abiding in the horizon. From this juncture, the initial veil of secrecy descends. Indeed, so effectively was the portal concealed from uninitiated eyes by a revolving stone that, once its location was lost, recovery became impossible. Thus, for 2 centuries following its subjugation under the barbarous Omar, the edifice remained impenetrable until Caliph al-Mamun, in the 9th century of our era, forced a passage at random through the solid masonry and fortuitously struck upon the entrance corridor. Gaining entry through the low gateway constructed thus in the northern face, at a significant elevation above the ground, we behold before us the passage of the horizon of the equinoctial point, which, while descending southward into the abyssal gloom, points northward toward the star of the Purple Arch. Upon crossing the threshold at the 17th course of Masonry, we recognize the very station where, in the 17th chapter, the catechumen is admitted as a postulant and exclaims, "I depart from the gate of Tazer, the ascent." What, then, is the gate of Tazer? It is the portal wherein the deity Shu, the personification of light, elevates the celestial disk. The gate of the north is the gate of the great God, he continues, referring palpably to the selfsame portal, precisely as, within the pyramid, the sole ingress is the gate of the ascent situated in the 17th course of the northern facade. Bidding farewell, in unison with him, to the light of terrestrial day and traversing the downward sloping corridor, we encounter, at a short distance, an exquisitely and precisely incised double line, scored perpendicularly upon the inclined wall in such a manner as to point downward to the foundation. This line demarcates the upper division of the passage, wherein the deceased of the ritual is deprived of every faculty save that of locomotion, from the more advanced section where his intellectual capacities are progressively restored. Continuing this prolonged descent, we arrive at an aperture in the western wall. Passing through the opening thus revealed, we ascend gently into a species of grotto at the base of the well, a square, perpendicular shaft with footholds hewn into its precipitous sides. Into that chamber of the deep waters, the postulant descends upon the western side, even as the sun at the close of day sinks into the western waves, only to burst forth in splendor upon the invisible realm. From the summit of this shaft, a level passage extends to the site of the divine nativity commemorated in the ritual, namely the chamber of the moon wherein, according to Egyptian doctrine, Osiris monthly renewed his birth. Within that chamber, formerly sealed with absolute rigidity, the emancipated soul was born anew, emerging thence to descend the ladder of the shaft, as depicted in the papyrus of Ani, and to be reunited with the postulant awaiting its return in the well of life. Thereupon, once the soul is restored, the initiation is solemnized, and fortitude is bestowed to withstand the impending ordeal. Returning from the depths of the well to the passage of the horizon and pursuing our course still further downward, we reach, after a brief horizontal extension, the subterranean chamber or the place of the central fire, wherein the initiate undergoes his ordeal. This chamber, excavated from the living rock, possesses an impassable floor strewn with colossal blocks of diverse heights, resembling a pool of petrified flame or the rugged contours of mountain ranges forged by the subterranean fires of the earth. Beyond this formidable cavern, a narrow passage terminates in void and nothingness. Resuming our exploration of the structure and emerging from the site of trial, even as the initiate, now elevated to the rank of adept, retraces his steps to shun the abyss of annihilation, we reascend the passage of the horizon until, slightly below the incised line, we arrive at a granite gate or portcullis integrated into the roof. This monumental barrier, which was originally completely concealed by masonry and was discovered solely by the dislodgement of a stone during Al-Mamun's violent entry into the pyramid, stands sentinel at the threshold of the secret places. Not only was the entire gate meticulously concealed, but the lower portion of the internal passage was obstructed by stupendous stone blocks, which remain unmoved and are perhaps immovable. Thus, even to this day, the lintel remains obscured, and ingress is achieved only through a breach forcibly made in the wall of the passage above these obstructions, a challenge precisely analogous to that experienced by the adept in traversing the lintel of justice prior to entering the double hall of truth. Creeping with difficulty through this breach, we find ourselves within a narrow, low corridor of approximately 129 feet in length, which ascends at an inclination slightly less than the gradient of the entrance passage, corresponding to the lower division of the Hall of Truth, where the adept offers his justification before the 42 judges of the unseen world, the gods of the horizon and the gods of the orbit. Thereupon, stooping beneath the low portal by which the corridor is terminated though not obstructed at its summit, the gateway of the festival, we stand upon a species of landing from which the entire network of interior passages diverges. On every side lies the intersection of the pure pathways of life, whereof the sarcophagus of Amamu speaks. Upon the western side lies the mouth of the well, the gate of Anruf, leading downward to the paths of obscurity. Before us stretch the fields of Alu, the blessed region wherein the justified soul performs those labors which he is privileged to undertake for Osiris. I have digged in Anruf, he declares at a later stage. I have drilled the holes, the apertures, that is to say, destined for the auspicious seed, the grain that grew 7 cubits in height, referring to the holes drilled into the ramps of the southern ascending passage, to which no symbolic significance has hitherto been ascribed. Beyond these fields, the path leads directly to the Queen's chamber, the place of the new birth, where the soul received her secondary existence. And here, upon the eastern wall, within a recess structured of 5 ascending stages, is a species of niche or image, the archetype, to employ the terminology of the ritual, wherein the soul is born anew, endowed with the 5-fold dominion of its regenerated senses. From this same juncture at the head of the well, there diverge those internal ladders depicted upon the aforementioned sarcophagus. Plunging vertically downward, the ladder fashioned for Osiris descends into the well. Northward, the ladder of the earth slopes downward toward the hidden lintel, the portal to the ascending way. Upward to the south, though at a marginally different inclination, runs the ascending passage designated by certain authors as the Grand Gallery, which constitutes the upper division of the Hall of Truth, the Grand Lodge, or the luminous chamber of the orbit. This extraordinary structure consists of a corridor approximately 157 feet in length and 20 feet in height, constructed entirely upon an incline, floor, walls, and ceiling alike, save for a small portion at its southern, or upper, extremity. Flanking the inclined floor on either side are 28 stone ramps, each containing an aperture, the ritualistic allusion to which has already been observed. At the upper terminus, the gradient of the floor is abruptly arrested, just above the Queen's chamber, by a block 3 feet in height, which forms a dais or throne of judgment. From this point, along the upper surface of the block or seat of the throne, the passage continues horizontally for approximately 61 inches, the flanking wall being not entirely vertical, but inclining minutely toward the slope. At the rear of this throne, the gallery is brought to a close by the southern wall, which descends in 7 overlapping courses to within 42 inches of the seat, leaving as an egress further southward a narrow, sepulchral tunnel. In the inclined roof of the gallery, which descends from south to north at a somewhat steeper gradient than the floor, are 36 overlapping courses, resembling the undulating waves of a river of light and corresponding to the number of decades in the orbit of the Egyptian year. Furthermore, upon the side wall of the dais at the upper extremity of the gallery, there are likewise 7 overlapping courses, superposed one above another and arching toward the summit, while in the position corresponding to that which our own globe occupies among the planets, a deep groove or orbit extends along its entire length. Thus, we are presented with a striking correspondence between the orbit and the passage of the sun within the double Hall of Truth, comprising the lower Hall of Truth in darkness and the upper Hall of Truth in splendor, capped at its loftier extremity by the throne of radiance. Above that throne ascends the habitation of the 7 exalted spirits serving their Lord, the Creator, who, as the sacred books attest, safeguard the sarcophagus of Osiris. We now approach the most inscrutable sector of the edifice. Divested of its noble proportions and compressed to so humble an altitude that a man must crawl upon hands and knees to traverse it, the passage penetrates the southern wall of the grand gallery and extends directly forward, leading first into the antechamber or place of preparation, and thence into the magnificent hall designated the king's chamber, situated in the most secluded recess of the structure. Within each of these chambers, a single solitary object is to be found. In the antechamber stands a species of Masonic veil, which none may pass without inclining the head. In the king's chamber lies a sarcophagus, not sealed but open, whilst the air shafts with which this profoundly subterranean room is abundantly ventilated demonstrate that it represents a chamber not of the dead, but of the living, the place of the Orient wherein, according to the ritual, Osiris is aroused from his slumbers. In this division of the edifice, the masonry shifts to granite, constituting, as it were, a distinct sanctuary within the pyramid, an inner house enclosed yet further within the house of Osiris, accessed via the low, sepulchral passage originating behind the throne. This is the house of glory depicted upon the coffin of Amamu previously cited, the mansion approached by the illuminate after navigating the tribunal of Osiris. Here lies the gate of the pure spirits, which may be entered solely by those cleansed in the waters of life and effulgent with the splendors of the orbit. Here, also, it appears, occurs the solemn address detailed in the Sciencinsin, wherein the deities in the house of Osiris speak, followed by the response of the deities in the house of glory, the jubilant canticle of the sanctified departed who stand victorious before the judgment seat, echoed triumphantly by the inner chorus of those beloved predecessors who have already entered the fullness of light. Above lies the Empyrean Gate, designated in the ritual as the opening of Ather, which conducts to the secret places of heaven. The ascending chambers above the king's chamber, formerly entirely sealed, which constitute the innermost, the loftiest, and the most arcane of the hidden places. And the entire structure is dominated and crowned by a colossal triangle of granite, masonically symbolizing the divine trinity of Egypt. Such is the intricate and hitherto unelucidated network of portals, passages, shafts, conduits, and chambers, some ascending, others descending, some level, some exceedingly rugged, others exquisitely polished, some grand in their dimensions, others so low as to compel crawling and so narrow as to scarcely permit passage, to be found within the pyramid of light. It remains absolutely unique. No other edifice, it may be confidently asserted, not even the subsequent pyramids, has ever contained any structure bearing the slightest resemblance to these upper chambers. Remarkable though it is in every feature, the most extraordinary circumstance of all is the manifest intention of the architect to preserve that secrecy which imparts such majesty to the esoteric theosophy of Egypt. What, then, was the purpose, the secret and jealously guarded design, for which this wondrous edifice was reared? To suggest that its diverse features are devoid of meaning or the mere products of caprice is a proposition utterly refuted by the profound foresight and meticulous calculation displayed in every detail. Nor, furthermore, can it be maintained that these arrangements were requisite for the purposes of an ordinary sepulchre. For, in the first instance, they are absent from the other pyramids employed for such interments. And, in the second, if there exists any intention that the architect has transparently manifested, It is the creation of such a succession of obstacles as would render the burial of a human body therein virtually impossible. In truth, the Great Pyramid represents the house of a tomb, yet it is an open rather than a sealed sepulchre. It is the tomb not of a mortal, but of a god. Not of the deceased, but of the risen. It is the tomb of the divine Osiris, whose earthly nativity, descent into the underworld, triumph over the serpent Apep, resurrection, and judgment of the dead constituted the most salient tenets of the Egyptian faith, and in mystical union with whom the sanctified departed traversed the path of illumination and safely negotiated the divine tribunal. Contemplated in this light, the pragmatic utility of the structure begins to manifest. Upon that doctrine reposed the entire organization of social existence among the ancient Egyptians. The calendar, the solemn festivals, the duties of the sovereign, the prerogatives of the priesthood, and the relations of the provinces to their paramount temples, all found their expression in the path of light. Consequently, profound confusion within the state, as well as detriment to religion, would inevitably result from any misconstruction or misrepresentation of doctrine, such as appears to have occurred under Khu-en-Aten, an eventuality highly probable given the obscurity of the symbols employed. The architectural symbolism of the Great Pyramid, however, provides a simple and virtually indestructible medium for perpetuating, without disclosing, the doctrines of Egyptian wisdom. That physical expression, once formulated, was never repeated. The other tombs and pyramids of Egypt claim affinity with the masterpiece of the Grand Master only through subordinate and isolated features. Thus, while the written records of the ritual, none of which currently extant likely antedate the reign of Khufu, were susceptible to alteration and text corruption, no lapse of time could impair, nor could any variation affect, within those secret recesses, the enduring masonry of the Pyramid of Light. This embodiment, at once occult and immutable, constituting literally an architectural ritual of the entire doctrine of light, accounts for the remarkably fragmented manner in which the sacred texts were committed to writing. During the first 3 dynasties, but a single chapter possesses a vague traditional claim to transcription, while another is said to have been revealed to Men-Kau-Ra, the grandson of the architect of the Great Pyramid. And although sacred inscriptions begin to appear upon the later pyramids, it is not until the 11th dynasty that they become in any measure common. Of the various chapters thus promulgated, whether utilized as inscriptions or inscribed upon papyri at diverse epochs, there have been, as Mr. Budge observes in his treatise on the mummy, 4 principal recensions. The first is that of the ancient empire, recorded in hieroglyphs, to which the highly significant inscription upon the sarcophagus of Amamu belongs. This is succeeded by the Theban recension, likewise in hieroglyphs, the papyri of which have been collated and published with immense labor by M. Naville, followed during the subsequent 20th dynasty by another version executed in the hieratic or sacerdotal character. Finally, we find the recension of the 26th or Sate dynasty, to which we owe the magnificent papyrus now preserved at Turin, of which Lepsius published a facsimile in 1846, comprising more than 160 original chapters, together with 3 supplementary ones. It was during this particular recension that the sequence of the chapters is said to have been established for the first time. What canon, then, or standard of organization did the revisers employ? It was assuredly not the relative antiquity of the chapters, for the sole chapter claiming to date back to the First Dynasty occupies the 130th place in the papyrus, whereas that which is therein ascribed to the Fourth Dynasty, and entitled The Entrance on Light in one chapter, as though it had formerly been the sole chapter in use, appears as the 64th. Yet the resolution of this inquiry appears to reside within the final supplementary chapter. For the papyrus asserts that the key remains accessible to all who possess a comprehensive understanding of the Masonic mysteries. This volume, the text declares, constitutes the book of the master of the hidden places. Consequently, within those selfsame hidden places, one must seek the secret of the master of the hidden places, the mystery of the words of order, as inscribed upon the sarcophagus of Amamu. It is this recension, therefore, which we shall contrast with the ritual in stone, a monument preceding it by more than 3 millennia, wherein the sheer vastness of the intervening epoch serves only to illustrate with greater brilliance the intimacy of their correlation. With sublime dignity does that colossal monument vindicate the mystical appellation it was accorded. Enveloped in an obscurity as profound as that which the Almighty has ordained for His secret sanctuary, amidst surroundings imperceptible to mortal sight yet faithfully depicting the splendors of the celestial firmament, the grand architect has established a throne which the passage of ages has been powerless to decay, and has indelibly inscribed within its hidden recesses the unalterable path of the righteous in characters of light, manifested through the unchanging revolutions of the heavenly spheres. Chapter 2. The House of Osiris. Amidst the manifold transformations witnessed by this current age of revolution, none possesses a more arresting character than the resurrection of primordial Egypt. For upwards of a millennium, from the day when the barbaric Omar solemnized the obsequies of ancient erudition amidst the conflagration of the great library of Alexandria, until the day when Champollion, resembling a modern Sothis, portended the dawn of a new epoch of Egyptian splendor, an ever-deepening obscurity enveloped the entire domain. Scarcely a century has passed since the most formidable penalties, both temporal and eternal, were decreed by the Sultan against any functionary who should presume to permit a Christian to approach the sacred harbor of Suez, the departure point of the Holy Hajj. In the present day, that same port serves as the bustling threshold to the most cosmopolitan thoroughfare on the globe. For centuries, Egypt remained not only the earliest but indeed the most vigilantly guarded sanctuary of Muslim jurisprudence. Today, its tribunals acknowledge a manifold jurisdiction of foreign powers, a phenomenon unparalleled in the annals of any other sovereign state. Within the span of living memory, its hieroglyphics remained an enigma abandoned in despair, its temples entombed beneath the accumulated detritus of successive generations, and the very antiquity of its ruins miscalculated by millennia. Today, these colossal edifices stand fully revealed to testify to their pristine grandeur. The royal annals may be perused in their original inscriptions, and the lapses committed by negligent scribes, who presumed that no human eye would ever gaze upon the papyri sequestered within the breast of the mummy, stand exposed by the hieroglyphic erudition of Europe. A singular fascination envelopes every aspect of existence in ancient Egypt. For while one may ascribe, with relative certainty, a historical genesis to all other empires, discerning the crude origins of China, Assyria, and even Babylonia, the epochs of Romulus or of Kekrops appear as mere medieval periods in history when contrasted with the eras of Khufu or of Mena. India attributes to her earliest Vedas an antiquity of no more than 4 millennia. The sacred scriptures of China date back scarcely 1,000 years further, while the origins of Babylonia extend approximately another millennium beyond that. Upon the banks of the Nile alone do we discover, centuries prior to the reign of the Akkadian Sargon, an established monarchy and a structured polity, a complex ritual and an organic hierarchy, a distinctive architecture and a well-developed alphabet. Thus, the primary anomaly that commonly obscures our understanding of antiquity, namely, the intrusion of an alien element into the development of a nation's customs, especially when that population has been transplanted from some entirely different soil, is absent from the Egyptian horizon. Consequently, the portrait we delineate of Egyptian civilization finds its origin, its evolution, and its ultimate perfection solely within the conditions of Egypt itself. No element of allure is lacking in that extraordinary panorama. The majestic river, the font of eternal vitality and renewal to the entire realm. The protracted vista of sublime temples crowning the banks. The joyous populace thronging its waters. The dances, the athletic contests, the melodies, the struggles, the continuous festivals, and the pleasure crafts jostling with the solemn vessels of the dead. All these components fashion a tableau which, framed in the radiant clarity of a cloudless sky, imparts an enchantment that can be neither rivaled nor forgotten. Nor does this tableau require any arduous exertion of the imagination to reconstruct from shattered and disconnected fragments. We are not compelled to assemble, into whatever coherence we can manage, the disjointed intimations of social existence laboriously culled from fortuitous allusions scattered across a multitude of disparate authors. Neither must we acquiesce in accounts of historical occurrences composed centuries after the event. We are enabled to proceed directly to the fountainhead and consult the primary testimonies. Upon the colossal propylaea of the temples, upon the walls, upon the monumental sarcophagi, upon the architraves, and upon the columns of those vast structures, we find the achievements of the rulers delineated in sacred hieroglyphs. While for the Battle of Lake Regillus we must rely upon the traditions preserved by Livy, for that seminal conflict of Megiddo, which transpired centuries before King Josiah perished upon that very plain, and long prior to the engagement at Regillus, we possess the contemporaneous narrative of the victorious Thothmes, alongside the inventories of booty compiled by royal scribes. Furthermore, the monuments of Egypt afford us not merely written accounts, but vivid pictorial representations of these occurrences. Of the triumphs celebrated by the illustrious Julius, what vestige remains for the contemplation of posterity? Yet the triumphs of Ramesses and of Seti, which occurred almost as long before the age of Caesar as Caesar's epoch preceded our own, endure to this day in exhaustive detail. The attire, the embellishments, the physiognomy, and even the hair coloration of the diverse races participating in those processions remain visible today upon the walls of the palaces that witnessed them. Of Moses and Solomon, of the founder of Rome, and indeed of the great apostle to the Gentiles, we possess not even a traditional likeness. Yet the countenance of Pharaoh may be as familiar to us as it was to his adoring subjects. A triple colonnade of massive pillars, possessing an infinite pathos in their solitary grandeur, is all that survives to indicate how the earth-shaking Poseidon was venerated in his sanctuary at Paestum. Conversely, every detail of the procession that traversed the vast Isles of Karnak, the lustral vessel, the wings adorning the sacred scribe, the choir of singers, the fourfold ranks of the priesthood, the sacred ark supported upon their shoulders, and the cherubim whose outstretched wings overshadowed the deity enthroned between, has been preserved for our scrutiny, together with the text of the solemn litany chanted by the congregants to R.A., the invisible light. Two distinct peculiarities characterize the annals of these primitive eras. Nothing is more remarkable than the scientific erudition which the Egyptian priesthood is increasingly acknowledged to have possessed, in proportion as the empirical evidence is more rigorously scrutinized. What contemporary architect would presume to construct an edifice exceeding 400 feet in height, replete with chambers of the most intricate configuration, which would require no restoration for 5 millennia. What other nation not only discovered the transcendental ratio between radius and circumference, the foundation of all curvilinear measurement, but also employed it as a fundamental principle of architectural design? Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.